Another day, another Barzam update. Some might say that 2023 is the year of the rabbit, but I'm calling it the year of the Barzam. Because not only did my development history on the thing become obsolete in a matter of weeks, but so did my previous update. These Barzam variants are really breeding like rabbits. So let's have a look at the latest Barzam information that we got. And this time around, it's all about the backpack and the many things that can be attached to it. On the top, we have this small, innocuous looking attachment point, but this is where all the magic happens. First up, we get a staple for Federation mobile suits, a clamp that can be attached to it to store handheld weaponry, with the examples given being the Mark II shield and the new version of the Hyper Bazooka. Next up, we get a small T-shaped connector for 2 extra vernier arms, and the 2 examples given should again immediately ring a bell. We have the Gundam Mark II inspired thrusters with beam sabers, and we have the weaponless versions that would later on be used for the backpack of the Jagan. And you might also remember these from the Black Hare's pre-production version. In my first video on the Barzam, I speculated that this was a completely different backpack, but it turns out that it was just the standard version, but with extra thrusters mounted onto it. But then for the real heavy stuff, we get a larger T-shaped connector, called the Bellows frame. Starting with the optional fuel tanks, there's a version that comes with extra thrusters, a large version that looks like the one used by the Nero, but just with a different mounting mechanism, and the standard Federation type that at first I couldn't really place. In fact, it's so standard for the Federation apparently that the first thing that came to my mind was the backpack of the Gyaradoga Heavy type, well, the Heavy Weapon type, and the Gyarazulo Angelo Sauper custom. But after quite a bit of brainstorming and searching around, I remembered the Seiko 1's lower legs and found this image to show you. But staying with that image, it does have what I would consider the standard Federation fuel tank, the longer ones, because we also see them on the Zeta Plus C1 and the Nero series. Moving on to the weapons then, where we again get some more immediately recognizable stuff, like the giant beam sabers from the Gundam Mark V that can also double as beam cannons, that have an output of 12 megawatts, which is significantly more powerful than even the Zeta Gundam's Hyper Mega Launcher. And apparently, these were just standard equipment meant to work with mass production mobile suits. I'll take a pair for my gym too, please. And also from the Gundam Mark V, or the Ixegu series, are the double missile pods. They hold 3 large missiles each and are powerful enough to destroy a mobile suit with 1 hit, although typically they are reserved for anti-ship warfare instead. We also get double missile launchers, but unlike the other weapons, I can't really place these. And because every other weapon is taken from somewhere else, I feel like this one should be too. It vaguely reminds me of the missile pods used by the Hyzak, but more stretched out, or those arm-mounted ones used by the gun tank R44, but again, more stretched out. Another suggestion then came from Annie Plamo on Twitter when I posted about this: the missile launchers of the Zaku cannon. It's not an exact fit, but it is the closest one we have so far. And when I asked about it on YouTube, most people were trying to gaslight me by saying that they're the Gym 3's missile pods. Function-wise, there could be a connection, but in terms of looks, they are pretty far apart. So if you've ever seen these things before, let me and everyone else know. What I can tell you more about then are the Gatling Smashers that were first seen on the G-Line series of mobile suits. These 4-barreled autocannons have a high rate of fire and are mostly meant for close-range combat. And it seems that even though these are most closely associated with the prototype G-line units that didn't enter mass production, even though they were supposed to, the weapon itself does seem to have entered mass production to some capacity. So I wonder if the same also goes for the missile launchers that the G-lines could also be outfitted with instead of the Gatling Smashers. And finally, we have another weapon that I was very surprised to see associated with standard Federation weapons. The beam cannons that you may or may not recognize from the slightly obscure Jagan heavy weapons type. But instead of being mounted on the shoulders, they're now mounted onto the backpack. Unfortunately, that is all that we know about these things so far. I really want to know if they were specifically designed for the Barzam's backpack as an option part, or if they were independently designed as a general purpose beam cannon that could work with all Hazels or like Titan's machines, and was then later on adopted by the Jagan heavy weapons type. But whatever the case might be, it is still interesting to see yet another connection between the Barzam and the Jagan. And what's also interesting to see is that, again, this seems to suggest that many, if not all of these parts, were at least intended to be readily available. So you had some serious options as a Barzam pilot. At least in theory. And I wouldn't be surprised if, in the future, we get another Advance of Zeta update telling us how all of these parts could also work with the Gyms, the Hyzacs, and what have you. Also, this update kinda confirms the model kit feature of the high-grade Barzam. In addition to being able to equip smaller stuff on the backpack, for larger things, it was possible to remove the backpack entirely and mount them directly onto the drum frame, with the example given here being the Fruity 2. And if that works, it probably wasn't too difficult to replace it with the Mark II's backpack either. And talking about the Barzam's backpack, for the people confused on how the Primrose 2 goes into the Barzam's torso, in this image you can see the nose sticking out from the back. But of course, it wouldn't be Advance of Zeta if we were only replacing things on the backpack. The Barzam High Mobility type was achieved by combining the Barzam with the Nidrohine, the bottom fighter of the Hazenthly 2 family. Thanks to the fact that the Barzam's frame was developed from the Wound Ward, this just worked, and it was apparently a really simple conversion. This configuration was nicknamed the Vervain by the development team, and was also outfitted with some other optional parts. It had the extra armor on the chest that was also seen on the pre-production type, a commander antenna based on that of the Marasai, the shield from the Kahar 2, and the Sayat rifle based on the Gapfle's Fayadin rifle. And just as with everything else on the Barzam and the Wound Ward, the main goal of this beam rifle was to be modular. It could be outfitted with long barrels, rapid fire barrels, short barrels, grenade launchers, beam sabers, high-powered sniper sensors, beam saber modules, different types of E-packs, and on top of all of that, it was also compatible with the beam rifle used by the Gundam TRS. Truly, this was the jack of all trades of beam rifles, and by just exchanging a few things, it could be fine-tuned for sniping, close quarters, or even underwater combat. And in the picture, you can see what is dubbed as the Sayat Rifle Enhanced Firepower version. It uses a long barrel, twin E-pack, extra sensor, hyper napalm, a sickle saber, and a few more unnamed options. Also, we got a little bit more information on that bulky chest unit. It comes with a diffused beam cannon, sometimes also referred to as a scattering beam cannon. But despite being outfitted with all of this firepower, the Vervain's biggest improvement was actually in the close combat department, courtesy of the Nidroheim II, or as it's sometimes also written, the Needlehazen II. The Hazensley II was developed as the standardized version of the Gaffley and incorporated many of its features, one of them being the ability to only transform its lower half, the Nidroheim II, into a claw mode. This increased the close combat capabilities of the Hazensley II in space, and by extension, those of the Barzam Vervain. And then to make the Barzam even more powerful, it could be outfitted with the Hammurabi II to turn it into the Barzam High Mobility Type Vervain Rah-II. As mentioned before, the Barzam could be outfitted with larger backpacks by removing the standard backpack and then attaching the new backpack directly to the drum frame. And to mount the Hammurabi II, it is connected to the Fruitadu II, which is connected to the drum frame. And finally, the Vervain Rah-II can also be outfitted with the same chin guard as the Hazensley or the Hazensley II. But that has been all for this update video that I definitely didn't have to re-record because while editing it, another batch of Barzam information dropped. On the flip side though, it did flesh out the Sayad rifle because in the original version of this video, I literally couldn't say anything about it because we only had an image. We didn't even have a name yet. So yeah, chances are that this video will also be outdated relatively soon, but I see that as a positive thing. Personally, I'm hoping that we're going to get a deep dive on the various option parts for the Sayad rifle and how the different Titans mobile suits play into them, or just like different Federation mobile suits as we saw with the Barzam's backpack options. And that has been all for the Barzam's development history. For now. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll probably see you all again in a few weeks with another update.